Welcome to Uncover the Human, where every conversation revolves around enhancing all the connections in our lives.
Whether that's with our families, co-workers, or even ourselves.
When we can be our authentic selves, magic happens. This is Alex Cullimore.
And this is Christina Amigoni.
Let's dive in.
This episode includes our interpretations of copyrighted works done by the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, or iPEC. Hello, and welcome back to this episode of Uncover the Human. We are continuing our core dynamics from iPEC's series today, and we are going on with the social influencer. So the influencers that change our energy based on the people that we are around and our social situations. So that's today. Where do you want to start on social?
Yeah, so social is a hugely influential influencer. That's
easy to
interesting.
say.
Yeah. Speaking, apparently, it's also a huge
influences social interactions too.
Yes. Actually, communication is a big part of the social influencer. Good. I can't say the word. I'm gonna stop saying it. And so, yeah, it's. I was actually just thinking about it, and there's a huge amount of energy and performance that we get depending on the people we have around in the moment, but also constantly. Today is quote day, just in case you didn't know that. But another quote that it always resonates with me is, you're the sum of the 5 people that are closest to you, and so that's what the social influencer is all about. It's like, how are you influenced and where you want to achieve and who you are as a person and how you perform by the people around you and the human environment around you.
Yeah. And so we can consider this from a few different angles. It comes down to things like, what is your desired amount and type of social interaction? This is what do you work best in social situations, and what's your attitude towards doing that, and how much are other people influencing you? If you have enough catabolic energy around you, for example, how much does that affect your ability to perform, and what can you do about that? And where your ability to generally communicate with others goes into this one in a huge way, because that is your connection point. Your ability to communicate verbally, non-verbally, however, with the people that are around you is going to dramatically influence your feeling of connection, belonging, ability to change things, autonomy, all of these key, crucial human influencers and motivations. And so what do we have in terms of a support system that's available to us, and how can we be accountable? These are all aspects of our social influencer. And just a point of conscious choice that we tend to have, just to help get our minds on this. One of the difficulties of looking at social influencers is that it's very easy to feel like it's other people, right? It's other people's fault, or I can't do this because this person's in the way, or I can't do this because that. And there might be times where somebody is an obstacle. So it comes back down, as it does in every coaching conversation, to what can you do? What can you personally do about this? And there's an idea in core dynamics, as well as in a lot of coaching in general, is what you kind of have 5 categories of options. You can remain victim to the situation. You can leave the situation. You can accept the situation and just say it is what it is. You can try and change the situation, or you can change your perspective on the situation. And all of those are viable options and can be viable in different situations. But when it comes back to something like social, it's easy to get caught up believing it's something externally forcing us, but we still have to come back to what can we do to consciously choose for ourselves how we want to shape this.
Yeah, that's a very important piece. And looking at our options and realizing that we actually do have a choice, it's very difficult, because then we have to live with that choice, and living with a choice, especially if we realize it's a situation that we can't change and we need to leave, that opens up a whole can of worms of grieving and losses and self-shame, and all sorts of other darkness that we may not be ready to face, or we're never probably ready to face, but we may not be willing to face.
This is why it's such a heavy influencer. When we know that there's something we have to change and it feels like it's difficult, that's going to be really challenging. That's why it's easy to put it on somebody else, as like they're the ones causing this, or to and in reality, our choice then is the thing that's difficult is facing all of the potential emotions that are going to come with making a choice on this, or having to commit to something that might be different than what has already existed. And it's not to underplay that's going to happen for everybody, but it is a good thing to be aware of, so that we can know that's why this influences energy so much. And yet on the flip side, it can also influence it in a very positive way when we know we have a lot of people around that support us, that aren't judging us, that have our best interests at heart. It can be much easier to make decisions, take risks, go do something we might not have done otherwise, and feel like we have a safety net, we have support, we're able to continue to move because we have that around us. So that can be a very positive boon to our supplies of energy, whereas in other ways, it might start to drain some of that energy that we have.
Yeah, indeed. So shall we get coaching?
Yeah, let's jump right in. The ever-present question, who's going to coach first?
Up to you.
All right, I'll jump in and coach then. Let's talk a little bit about...
I always leave it up to you, and then I never like the answer.
This is a fascinating turn of events.
Maybe
actually, it would be okay either way. If you'd like to swap this,
yeah,
we can swap this around, because I can't remember what we did last time either.
I don't
That's
know.
been too long.
Go ahead. It's going to be my turn eventually. I'm accepting the situation as it is. I can't change it.
All right, but before we jump immediately into coaching, let's talk about an anabolic team. What would your definition of anabolic team be? This is kind of bridging from definition into coaching.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm going to take a tangent on another definition before we even get to anabolic team. So let's define anabolic. It's been a while. And while it's a word that catabolic and anabolic, it's a word that we understand, they're not commonly used in everyday life and most people's lives. And so anabolic and catabolic energy are part of the energy leadership that model that iPEC presents. And they talk about how catabolic energy it's really the threat response energy. And so it is more destructive. It's more draining. It is absolutely necessary when we are responding to a threat and we need to react fast. But it's very difficult to perform and live in that energy long term because it's so draining and powerful.
And anabolic, like
go ahead.
They're still important. It's important to have these, and catabolic gives you energy in the short term. It's like fight or flight. If you're running away or if you're hiding away, you're protecting yourself, you're preserving energy for the future. If you're fighting, you're using energy to get out of a situation. It's giving you the energy to do that. All of these are still energies that can be used. It's just that on a long term, they tend to be destructive or exhausting, or just start to pull away from our overall ability to build, which brings us to anabolic. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Just wanted to give that as the example.
Yes. Good. Very good example. Cortisol is a big catabolic type of hormone and energy, and we all know we can't live on that. That can be destructive for our body if we have too much of it. And so anabolic, on the other hand, is the energy where we are past the threat response. We're past the amygdala and the fight or flight, and we are able to look at helping others, supporting, compromising. I mean, the compromising is still pretty close to the catabolic, has quite an amount of catabolic energy, but it's better than just full on leaving or fighting or freezing. So it's compromising energy, it's collaboration energy, it's supportive, and that's where things can actually flourish. That's where growth can happen. That's when things can move forward. That's when we perform better. Because we are calm from an energy point of view, but we have higher views and a much more open view of the world. If we think about, I always think about a cave. Catabolic energy, we're closed into our cave, and that's it. The outside world is an enemy in some way, whether it's an enemy that makes us want to stay in that cave or it's an enemy that we want to fight. We're still seeing the outside world as a cave. We have a very limited tunnel view, which is the way it should be when we are in a threat response state. Anabolic energy is when we see everything. That's when the world starts opening up and we see possibilities. And that's where ideas come from, problem solving, collaborating with all those things can happen in catabolic energy levels.
Agreed. And the other way to think about catabolic and anabolic that I sometimes like to refer to is that catabolic is in a very specific way, it's a destructive type of energy. It literally is breaking things down so that you can have energy. So you think about things like adrenaline, you think about things like that. There's a breaking down of things like muscle tissue so that you have energy. It's important that we are able to access this because there are threat situations where we need that. Anabolic is this energy created through like more building and more constructive ways. And I don't love using the words destructive and constructive because it can have so much judgment, but I mean that in a very literal sense, in that there is kind of a destruction that is giving energy versus a construction that is giving energy, not in the a positive or negative way, because these really don't have judgment to them. You have to have all of them, and they are necessary in all kinds of different situations. They're not good, they're not bad, they are, and being able to choose between them is more helpful. So just to redefine and restate that, because all the words that we use can feel like judgments or can feel like they have a negative or positive connotation, and I feel like it's important just to reiterate that these aren't about being negative or positive, because they are just necessary.
Yes, indeed. So shall we go back to coaching?
Now that we've defined that, let's talk a little bit about anabolic team. Tell me a little bit about what makes an anabolic team in your mind. And
so an anabolic,
what comes to mind when you say anabolic team, I guess, too?
Yes. So what comes to mind for me, an anabolic team for my own influencer, for my own experience, is a team that actually I have thought about this, but a long time ago, and it's probably changed. But I would say empathy is a big part of that, whether it's a team or even individuals, but individuals that really approach things with empathy, approach life with empathy. So an innate desire to see everybody else's point of view and my point of view, and not just see it, but understand it and validate it, in the sense of not judging it. So I guess non-judgmental. A non-judgmental team that has a lot of curiosity and empathy, and that's how they operate around me. That's where I thrive, because then we can build together. There's a lot of curiosity in those moments when we are in low places, in more catabolic places for that matter, because of something that happens. We are able to share what's going on, and we receive that support and empathy as a response, as opposed to judgment or, well, just be done with it, or we know we have to bottle it in because it's not a safe space. And so if another big word I would say is psychological safety. An anabolic team is a very psychological safe team for me, and it's in authenticity. It's a team where I am accepted as myself, and not just through words, but through actions and constant actions. And so I never have to feel that I have to put a mask on, or I have to say things differently, or do something else, and I have to withhold. I'm not a fan of having to withhold. I feel like I do it, and those are the relationships that don't work out when I feel like I can't share.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like there might be a huge tie-in between some of that curiosity and lack of judgment, and then withholding. If you say, does it feel like there's a connection there? And if so, what is that to you?
I would say yes, there's a big connection, because I think that I judge myself enough for anybody else to not have to join in. And so when I'm in a constant battle with not judging myself so much and not feeling like I'm not good enough, it helps me tremendously when I don't have an echo from the people around me that will continue to say, not continue, but that will bring up like, well, like you can't do it that way, and or that's you need to be pushed. Or it's like the minute I start feeling that I'm not accepted as myself, that's when I shut down, and that's when I spend so much energy trying to not feed my self-critic, my inner critic.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely makes sense. Self-critic can be especially powerful, and there's no need to add I don't know, supporting voices to the critic. Yes. You don't want to add other voices in that chorus. That makes sense.
I don't need the backup singers. It's loud enough in my head. Thank you.
That's a great way of describing it. No background singers. So in that, there's a part of the social influencer is also understanding some amount of accountability, right? There could be productive partnerships. So what do you see as the line for you where you know that it's kind of, you mentioned one of the examples is like, you need to be pushed. That's a pretty direct statement and carries a lot of assumptions if it's not qualified. And at the same time, you talked about being able to build and create with your anabolic team. So what helps you understand and differentiate for yourself where that line is of a constructive boosting push, quote unquote, and something that becomes a more limiting, less anabolic push?
I would say language is a big part of that. And so the words that are used are a big part of it. Like I feel like I push myself a lot, very frequently. I get bored easily. And so, which means the opposite side of that coin is that I'm constantly looking for something new, some new experience, something else to learn. And so the language used that judges me for not being that person, that's the most triggering. That assumes that my comfort zone is not doing new things, not experimenting, not learning. That pushes a big button because I do know that I'm not. I'm constantly moving and I'm constantly getting out of my comfort zone, and so yes, I do thrive when I'm pushed and need to be pushed. Not the way to get me to go there. But believing in me and saying like, hey, this, and this has happened actually. I've had some great bosses that have done that, where they don't give me a new opportunity that's completely outside of my comfort zone because I need to be pushed. So that's not the goal. The goal is because they believe in me. And so the first communication is like, you will do great. I do believe that you can really make a difference in this spot. And I know it's not something you've done before, and I'm here to support you. So let me know how I can do that. Are you willing to take it on? And I don't think I've ever said no when it's stated that way. And so first of all, like, what's the goal? Like, where am I going? And so a very clear stated goal from a team perspective of like, social perspective of like, this is the goal of trying to do this, and a recognition of my abilities and a recognition that I am good enough as today. And here's a growth opportunity. And how can I be there in that growth opportunity? As opposed to where you are today is not good enough, which is why you need to be pushed. Okay. First of all, I have nowhere to go. I don't understand what I'm pushing myself to. And second of all, why am I not good enough today? So that's where I get stuck.
That absolutely makes sense. That ties into exactly with what you're saying about, the anabolic team is not judgmental. When you use phrases like, "Oh, it's because you're not good enough and you need to be pushed," that feels like it's obviously carrying implicit judgments. There's a judgment that it is not enough. There's some line that is not being met, some bar that is not being met. So that would obviously be painful, and it's a great delineation between what is a progressive, growth-oriented push and what is more destructive or can create resistance, defensive,ness. And that makes sense with what you've talked about previously on the podcast about like not liking to feel invisible, not liking to feel like you don't exist. And if the people aren't addressing who you are and what you are now, it would be threatening to that as well. And you've mentioned that, if there's a button to be pushed, it's because there's a button there. And so if you think about it being a button push that somebody is telling you have to do this, or that you need to change, what would be to go back into your curious and empathy, what would be a curious or empathetic response to that, to maybe help build awareness that you do exist, or build what you feel like the story is that's coming up in their minds or about you?
It's a good question. I say an empathetic and curious response is to understand where they're coming from. Like, what do you see, or what's the opportunity? And so instead of seeing it as a judgment of who I am, seeing it as an opportunity with potentially triggering language, but seeing like, okay, so what's the opportunity? where do I see the opportunity here? Now, will I be in a completely non-judgmental state to be able to listen to that? No, a button is pushed and it's a very big button. So I would say that also the first thing to do is the awareness and the and the admitting that it is a button, and say like, hey, you know, like that's a button for me. When I'm told you need to be pushed. So can, you know, I'm not sure where it comes from. So illuminate me.
That's good. So in that curious space, you've also mentioned that since it's so triggering, obviously you're not going to be able to maybe immediately walk into that. And why, even if you give yourself a break and you can like disarm the trigger for a bit and get more curious about it, it's walking back into a potentially triggering situation. So if you think about protecting yourself and giving yourself a fair shake at making that kind of stab and getting into that curious space, knowing that it could have some triggers again in the next follow-up conversation, what are some ways you can protect yourself and give yourself the space to be able to live in your values in a potentially triggering situation?
I would say is actually go ask for help from my anabolic team.
Hey, there it is. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Way to circle that one around.
Well, that's really comes to. That's why an anabolic team it's a rare thing, and it takes a lot of effort to build. Is because it's that team where you can go and share. Hey, this is what's happening, and I don't know that I know how to deal with this and respond to it in the way that I want to. No, in the way that I want to respond. And so the anabolic team is the team that would help me go through that.
That's great.
And,
so having
you know, and if anybody on the anabolic team, you know, provides catabolic language, then they're going to be off the team very quickly. That's what I'm going to go to step 5, which is change the team and find a better team.
All right. So as I kind of dismount off of this coaching iteration, to go bridge between both your self-reflection and some advice, if you're looking at potentially changing a team, and we all have times where we have to change teams, or, you know, just through natural processes, everybody changes enough that even if it was working at some point, it might be different. What's some advice you would give yourself and or other people in facing that kind of change?
That's a big change. That is a very difficult change.
Doesn't have to be all encapsulating.
That is a very difficult change. I would say the advice that I constantly give myself is, yes, I have responsibility and accountability in this, and no, it's not a reflection on my self-worth. We've all, and we will constantly, but we've all changed the people that are closest to us. That team constantly changes, and the beginning of that change, at least for me, it's always been very hard because it's where the inner critic feeds off of, well, you're not good enough to have a friend that lasts more than X years. Or you're not good enough to have a friend that, you know, you get close to and then they start pushing you away. So it's not their fault, it's your fault. It's because you're not good enough to be a human with friends, or a human with teams, and a support team around you, an anabolic team around you, is, you know, it's all because of you. So my default is really to look at me, not blame others. And what I am been working on, well, constantly, and I'll be working on pretty much for the rest of my life, is that it's not about blame. What if it isn't about blame? What if it isn't about blaming me or others? It's just not about blame. It's about growth. We all grow in different ways. Or, you know, some people grow faster depending on the measures than others, but we all evolve. We're constantly evolving. We're not static beings. And with that are the way we look at the world, the way we look at people, our viewpoints, our perspectives, the needs that we have as humans that need to interact with other humans change. And so it's a natural process that relationships end and new ones begin. And so once I'm able to accept the end without judgment and finding blame for it, then I'm also be able to look back and think like, well, I've done it before. I've created an anabolic team, support team around me in the past. So the evidence is I can do it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really great. I appreciate that. And thanks for kind of bridging kind of between some advice and that, because I think that's great self-reflection on what's important to you and what you understand as like if I can release myself of the idea that it's about blame or about some personal judgment, that gives me the space to realize all of the rest of the important things, which is I can do this again. It's natural that there's changes in humanity. We're going to have this evolution throughout our lives, and I'm part of that evolution. And this is my next evolution, maybe, or this is what I think needs to happen next. And looking back at the past is a great way of saying, like, well, I have done these things before, and it may be painful, scary, as it always is, to trust the process, to jump into the next unknown. But I have more trust and can have some trust that I can get to that other side.
Yeah. Still hard.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't make it easy. Knowing all that doesn't make it easy.
Yeah.
But it usually makes it worth it, especially when you're able to build a more and more and more anabolic team each way. So that the evolution of which team you build also is, it's an evolution to look at. And celebrate.
A virtuous cycle in that you start to build the anabolic team. It gives you the support to make sure you can continue to build a different and or continuing anabolic team, a continually evolving anabolic team.
Yeah. And also the releasing the judgment that it's about X amount of years. It's like, well, if you're friend for 50 years and you're great friends, like, is time what determines how successful or how supportive or how great a friendship is? Is it time, or is it something else?
One last awareness question then: what would be things you'd want to put on as a good evaluation of a relationship? And you've mentioned some of them with the anabolic team stuff, but just what are some ways that you would want to evaluate the quality of a relationship, a friendship?
I really think it goes back to authenticity. Like, if I can be myself and I can feel supported in myself as myself pretty much all the time. Like, when I think about my own anabolic team, I don't think of anyone that would actually has made the cut or has stayed on the team that has flip-flopped on that. Like, it's not like, oh, well, I accept you as you sometimes, and then some other times, well, maybe not. Like, that's an automatic de-teaming for me. And so it has to be consistent. It's like the consistent showing up as accepting me as me, without masks, without armor, with my own demons. And so it's more than just accepting me, it's accepting me and my demons. Somebody that can stick around through after I've gone through my lowest periods and still be empathetic and curious and supportive. That's who makes it on the team and stays on the team. If it's just about the ups and not the downs, that's not going to work, because that's not reality. If I have to figure out what to say, because I can't say things in a certain way, or what to bring up, it's out. It's done. It's very hard to come back from that. So, I have to be able to share what's going on, and my full self, no matter how ugly it is.
So the quality of relationships is inversely proportional to the weight of the armor you have to carry around.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah.
It's
very selective and small team.
And that's also absolutely natural, because if you want to be authentic, it works for some people, because that also is their authenticity. You can't expect it to work for everybody, and the attempt to make it work beyond that is a fool's errand. If we believe that it's about having a quantity of friends as well, that can be a very difficult way to think that we should have like a massive anabolic team. That is unlikely to be able to like support, just time-wise, when you support that close of a relationship on that many fronts.
You can't. It's like Brene Brown says, it's like, take out the 2x2 piece of paper and write down who are the people whose opinion actually matters. and write it in pencil.
Yeah.
Because it's going to change.
For me, it's my 6 cats. That's the opinions that matter, and they will make me know it.
And is it written in pencil? Because the number changes for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of has to be a pencil at that point.
Yeah. All right. Should we flip?
All right, let's flip it.
All right. So part of social influencers awareness is, and being able to perform at the highest, is understanding the desired amount and type of social interaction that works best for you. So what does that look like?
Oh man, that is an answer that is loaded with context. There's so many different shades of gray, I feel like, in this.
That's when we're going to get into the other pieces of the social influencers.
Oh man. So one thing, even
I thought I picked an easy one.
It's not that it's not easy. It's just that I'm trying to narrow the amount of edge cases I'd have to write into this. Like one way people like to look at these things is like introverted to extroverted, and I don't really love that as a dichotomy because I think there's times where I really get some energy out of being around some people, and there's times, and usually no matter the person, there's a limit to that, where at some point I'm like, okay, I'm beat. I've been around too many people, even if it's people that I like feel very comfortable with. I'm just, okay, I need a break and I need some alone time. So that's why I end up with so many different edge cases and gray areas in this one for myself, because I don't just fall into extroverted, introverted. I don't just like big groups, small groups. Like there are times like facilitating is sometimes really energizing, which is kind of it's a two-way conversation with a full room of people. Like I'm helping to present some information and I want to see how it's reflected back. And I can get a lot of energy out of doing that because there's something really exciting about being there, helping people like open their awareness to something totally new. And they're always helping me understand totally different angles of how it's being presented, well, what it means to them, what it could mean. There's just thrilling curiosity being explored in that situation. In a lot of other situations where it's that many people, if I'm at like a networking event, if there's a ton of people, I'm going to be drained in like 45 minutes. So it's not going to take long before I'm like, okay, this is fun. I can put on a nice face, but on the inside, my battery's like screaming, I'm out, I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
Side note, that's about 44 more minutes that I have in me for those types of events.
Which is why between the two of us, I'll go do some of those.
That's why I said you. I'm like, oh, networking event. Alex will be there.
And to be honest, there are times
behind
I'll
him
have
or
a
next to him.
Brief 10 minutes where I'm like, this is fun. I'm meeting people. That's interesting. I don't know this person. Then like 10 minutes later, I'm still in a conversation. I'm like, okay, well, I gotta go. Like, I don't know if that's just my own personal distractibility. But at some point that energy drains from me. So I think I do enjoy being around people. I particularly enjoy one-on-one conversation. I think is probably one of my favorite, like more energizing ways of communicating, when it's with somebody that I can really trust and have lack of judgment, and they're curious and I'm curious, and we can both feel like we're on the same page of this is a partnership of just curiosity and being, and just we're willing to do this. That's where it's particularly energizing. So if that's a good part of the pie chart of meandering I could do on that answer. I don't know how much that answers the original question.
It definitely answers the original question. And so it definitely sounds like you have enough awareness to understand what kind of situations can have more people or less people, or what kind of energy can be in those situations. And it also sounds like the main difference that at least I heard is anabolic group, less or unknown anabolic group. And so, knowing even on a one-on-one it's an anabolic one-on-one, not a catabolic one-on-one to choose, and the anabolic aspect of facilitating. And so when you think about your anabolic gang, team, support group, what makes it so?
So I was actually thinking about this recently, and in terms of what I actually kind of backed into this when I'm thinking about values and personal values, because what I started to realize is some of the things that are really inherently that I value a lot. Some of those things are what I have as core values. And so when I think about an anabolic team, it's people who share some of those and where I see that reflection. And to that end, the ones that I really appreciate are true curiosity, like people who know that they don't know things, know that there's a limit to their own knowledge, or are just curious to know some more. They want to know better ways of going about, especially when it comes to topics like how to live and how to be humans and how to like make something work in that fashion. That's the kind of curiosity that I really enjoy, and having that genuine non-judgmental space. And I see those two as tied, because I think there's a good argument to be made for judgment being the other side of curiosity, other side of the spectrum from curiosity. So the more people are into that curious zone where they're able to really dive into something and just they want to know more about it, they're able to like pull in abstract themes, just having that kindness, that compassion, and that curiosity are all really important parts of what I would consider like an anabolic team. And I list curiosity. The number one thing would be non-judgment, but I like saying curiosity better because I think that is what I would define as non-judgment.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And actually, to tie it back to your original answer to the first question, it also can explain why a large group that it could be participants in a facilitation classroom it's more energizing than a networking group. Because if we think about the point of being in a training or in a program as participants, in theory, is the curiosity. And so while maybe not all people will be curious for every single word that is said in that room, the general environment is to be there to be curious and learn. And so the learning becomes the goal. It's really the goal of the group, and it's the energy of the group. The curiosity is, if it's especially a group of curious people, it is very present. And in a networking event, to put a huge judgment on networking events, it is about judgment, actually. Because it is that, let's work the room, it's, say your title and where you work and where you graduated, if it's that type of working union, and then judge the person or be judged to be able to stay or move on and choose to be curious. But it's all about judgment first and curiosity second, for the most part. I'm sure there's people that go to networking events, they're very curious, but because the networking event point is to meet as many people as possible, generally, you don't have time for curiosity. You have time for judgment that then leads to curiosity.
Yeah, it's like a prime, like, let's go evaluate this. Are you worth continuing to talk to? Because I got 20 other people I could talk to. And then that evaluation points is challenging. And I guess that does present a potentially great reframe for being in networking events of like, hey, this is a chance to share and to be curious about what else is out there. So like the way we have continued to approach our work, we find ways to be more human about things, which can be in a lot of ways, a lot of things we talk about. And hopefully things like this podcast are a great example of this. We have ways to help people access new ideas and ways of thinking about that. And so maybe a networking event can be a way to both share some of that and share some of the what I find to be valuable about a kind of our approach, and some excitement I have in sharing that, just because I think it can do a lot for people. And it's really exciting to see it when it really takes off. So maybe a reframe is to realize that there's a lot of things to be curious about in other people and how they're approaching things, as well as be curious about how we can present what we do. And this is something that's very exciting to share, because there's some value in it. And I don't do this because I just, trying to crank out hours. I do this because there's something genuinely interesting and valuable to me in it. And so I get something out of that that's totally different. And maybe if I reframe that in networking events and try and let go of some of the inherent feeling that I have, whether it's true or not, that it is kind of a judgment space and an evaluation space, maybe that is a good path forward to, expanding that from 45 minutes to an hour.
Or maybe it's 10. What would it look like if the curiosity was also, and the non-judgment was on yourself too?
That's a good question. I think I guess I could be more curious about how I show up in those situations, and what is a good way to kind of approach people, and how can I both be curious about them and be curious about ways in which we share our philosophies, not because I want people to understand it, they'll all go buy our product or something, but just to be curious in like, hey, what are ways that people can resonate with this? Because there's just something interesting about seeing how people respond to it, which just goes back to kind of the facilitator idea. When people respond to the ideas that you're putting out there, you have a different angle. Whether you're going to take it on board and change your messaging or not, you have a different angle of understanding on how it's received and what you might do differently in the future, and how you might say this in a different way, and just to help people connect to what I find as the real value behind doing work like this and approaching people on a particularly human level.
Yeah, it sounds like definitely a more uplifting and anabolic way to look at networking events.
Yeah.
How does it feel?
Feels better. It'll be a little easier. And I also have to drag myself out of the house, and it's still going to be a real like personal kicking and screaming, dragging myself out by my collar moment, but I'll get there. And as long as I can keep that as an intention, it would be a lot less trepidation going in there, and a lot less like having my antenna up waiting for judgments from the other participants.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yes, you still have to have that individual awareness of where you are at from a social point of view, your own social meter in a way. And so if you're thinking on anabolic team and how it's that non-judgmental, curious team, how do you recognize when that's lacking, and what do you do? Sorry, stacking questions. How do you recognize when it's lacking? Let's start with one.
Great questions. And I think those stacked questions are actually tied for me. I recognize it because of what I do. I start to shut down. I start to reach out less. I start to, when I feel like there's some kind of judgment in the air, or like, oh, I can't express it this way because I don't think it's going to come across. I think I have a long habit of being pretty avoidant in that, so I immediately go to avoidance and not getting into just, even if they might not have even meant it that way, they might not have been judgmental, but when I start to feel that, or feel like I can't express some of that curiosity, or can't just be open, I'll start to pull away, and I'll start to step back, or I'll start to be really I'll notice things like I'm going to take way too long to figure out how to respond to somebody, because I'm like, oh God, how are they going to react to this? And then I'm like working over wording that at some level like was already done an hour ago, but I'm still kind of hashing over it or something, and before I send an email out or something. Like it's something like that, where I start to see those resistance points where I'm stepping away. That's when I know that there's something off. And that is what I do.
Excellent self-awareness. So it sounds like in our scale from remaining a victim to changing your perspective of it, you land around the leaving it.
Yeah, it's kind of an inadvertent leaving.
Yeah.
or a very passive leaving anyway.
Yeah.
Like, I'm kind of like already stepping back, and it's not helpful, but it's just it's already what's happening.
Yeah. How do you determine when a different way of approaching the relationship is worth? So maybe it's passively leaving may not be the blanket way to deal with all of them.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Some of it's kind of a gut feeling, and then also going back over the relationship and knowing, like, were there times where it was like there was available to be authentic, where it was available to feel comfortable and to feel and I think I didn't mention it as part of like what I evaluate in a team, but that comes out for me in non-judgment and curiosity. There is some authenticity to that, because I think allowing myself to be authentic and seeing that in other people and some of the things that I truly appreciate helps that anabolic. And it's when I don't, it's the same way as you were describing it, like the less armor that I have, the more I know it's more quality relationship. So if I'm feeling like there's a reason to kind of start passively stepping away, or start to recognize that I'm just doing it because it's such a defaulted habit, then it's worth going back and looking back at the relationship over time and being like, okay, is it true that it has always been this way, or is it true that were there signs beforehand that maybe there was sticking points, or am I just like really reacting to this one, because it just happened to be a button that was pushed, and I'm really reacting to this one event, and that's pushing me away, and that has been aided by the fact that I've been doing a lot for years now, because it's just kind of such a common reaction I think that I have, that I can recognize and be curious that there might be a different way to do this, that maybe I'd be better served, or just I would like to experiment with doing something more productive, as difficult as that is internally to accept, when the default is just to like, okay, get yourself out of this. There's no point in trying to change this. It won't change.
Very good. Very good awareness and self-reflection. Definitely. So unpacking deck take a long time. So I do have a last question that's not related. So this is not a very coaching-like situation.
All good. That would be like an hour session.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. What can you accomplish when you have an anabolic team around you?
Not to turn that around, but what can't you accomplish? I mean, like, if you have like that true anabolic team where you got that curiosity, you've got people who just want to see things built up, or curious about whatever they're doing, and they are really into like making something better for people, and they want to help you, you want to help them. You just, it at that point, I feel like when you really get into that, I don't even have the time start to think about what's being accomplished or not accomplished. We're just doing things that feel like we're moving in the right direction, excited to be doing this. So when it comes to that, that's why, cheekily, I do feel like it is like, what can't you accomplish? Because at that point, like I'm not even like thinking about accomplishment, but almost once it gets to that.
That's very that's a great point. A very non-judgmental point, for that matter, of not even looking at things as accomplished or not accomplished. And you mentioned being as being a big part of how you recognize you have an anabolic team. So it's more, it sounds like it's more about being than doing. Another thing that, to tie it back to one of some of the answers that you provided earlier, is the, not feeling like you're just clocking hours in a job. And so then it just becomes about being in a job, not doing to clock hours. So what have you accomplished around anabolic themes?
I think the last year and a half is a pretty good example of all the things we've accomplished pretty well just within like Siama. We've built that. I've now built going through coaching, but met a bunch of people there that are great at like learning together and been building new things, and just being curious about what we can do and what we can do with this and how we can help people with this. But things like the leadership program, which we've built and then have continued to evolve, and that's a good example of like not feeling like there's a point of accomplishment or not, because it's doing. Like, we're just doing and improving this because there's something that can be done, and well, we could tweak this, we could change this, and that it doesn't feel like rework. It doesn't feel like we're melting down, building up, whatever it is. It's just continuing to move on that, and it is both being and doing at the same time, but not doing for the sake of specific finish line. It's doing because it feels important to be doing it.
That's very very powerful to be in that state. All right, that's all the questions I have, because unless we want another hour to unpack.
That's a good one. And these are good examples of the self-awareness to go look at when you think about social influencers, because it is back down to what is actually making us uncomfortable here, and what would we like to choose to do about it. And if we're met with resistance, what's the next choice? So at some point, maybe there's enough resistance where like, I have to take a break from this, or I do have to leave the situation. And that's not, there's nothing wrong with approaching it that way. There's nothing wrong with that being the answer. It's just about being conscious of why you're doing it, so you can feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, for sure. And if you think about the social circle and the people, that will allow you to perform better, to accomplish more, if that's a measure, to just, it's not about accomplishing. It's about being. Who can you be, capital B, capital E, with? That's your anabolic team. As opposed to who are you performing for? Who are you doing for? Because it's all about what you do, and that's to avoid negative judgment. If you can just be, you found your team. Yeah.
And you can think of that like about performance. No wonder it's an energy drain, because performing is you have to put energy into that. So if you're performing something that's not you, you're putting energy into something that's not you. You're like, that will become an energy drain to you being able to do the things and be yourself, capital B, be that. And so that it makes sense that would be tied directly to what's giving you or taking away your energy.
Indeed. Indeed. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening.
Thank
I
you.
think next we're going to move into disciplines.
Time for disciplines. Done with influencers.
Yes.